After her father's betrayal, Nike was always angry all the time. Nothing made sense anymore. At school, she didn't care about her grades. All she wanted was to be noticed, and that meant causing trouble wherever she could. She found a partner in crime, her classmate, Bimpe. One afternoon, Nike and Bimpe planted a note in the teacher's lounge. The note was written in a way that made it seem like Mr. Ade was talking badly about the English teacher, Miss Esther. The words were harsh, insulting her teaching skills and mocking her in a cruel way. The next day, Miss Esther found the note. She was furious. Without thinking twice, she stormed into Mr. Ade's class, interrupting his lesson. "How dare you say these things about me?" she shouted, waving the note in front of him. Mr. Ade was confused, his eyes widened in shock. "What are you talking about, Miss Esther? I never wrote that." But Miss Esther wasn't listening. The students watched. They whispered amongst themselves. Nike and Bimpe exchanged satisfied glances. Their plan was working. The argument between the teachers got so heated that the principal had to be called in to break it up. After their plan worked, Nike and Bimpe became more daring, starting rumors and causing misunderstandings between other teachers as well. As the days passed, Nike's grade began to drop. She couldn't concentrate in class, and homework felt like an impossible task. A week after her mother left, Nike came home from school to find a stranger in the house. A woman, dressed in a brightly colored clothes, was sitting in the living room. Nike stopped in her tracks, confused. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "My name is Amina," she said, "your father's friend." "What friend?" Nike's stomach twisted. She had never seen this woman before, and yet here she was, sitting comfortably in their home. Before Nike could ask more questions, her father walked in. "Nike, this is Amina. She will be staying with us for a while," he said, his tone casual, as if this was all completely normal. But to Nike, nothing about this felt normal. It felt like another piece of her world was being ripped away. "I will teach them a lesson they will never forget," she said to herself. And that night, when everyone was asleep, Nike entered her father's room. She found his best white shirt and soaked it in water before putting it back in the drawer, as if nothing had happened. Then she grabbed his expensive body cream and emptied the bottle. She replaced it with mayonnaise from the kitchen, shaking it up to make sure it looked just like the cream. Then she sneaked into the living room, found Amina's slippers, and filled them with toothpaste. She smiled and thought of her reaction in the morning. The next day, her father stood in the living room, holding his wet shirt. "Why is my body cream so greasy?" he muttered, rubbing his hands together as if he spread butter on them. Meanwhile, Amina shrieked as she tried to clean toothpaste from her slippers, glaring at Nike, who stood there, pretending to be clueless. Nike smiled to herself, satisfied. It was a small victory for the first time in a while. As days turned into weeks, Amina's presence in the house became more permanent. Nike tried to avoid her as much as possible, but it was hard. Amina acted as if she belonged there, cooking meals, sitting in her mother's chair, and even talking to her father like they were a couple. Nike and her father barely spoke anymore. When they did, it was strange and uncomfortable. Dele seemed happy with Amina, and that only made Nike feel worse. It was as if her father had moved on from their old life, leaving both her and her mother behind. Nike had to repeat the same class twice because her grades were not good enough. She felt embarrassed because all her friends had graduated and she was left with younger classmates. Feeling frustrated, she begged her father to let her change school. She explained that it was hard for her to stay with students who were not her age mates. But her father refused. He told her that she needed to work hard instead of running away from her problems. Few years later, Nike grew into a stunning young woman, just like her mother Bisi. At 16 years old, her beauty was undeniable. Whenever she walked through the streets, heads would turn. Men, young and old, couldn't help but stare at her, and whispers would follow her wherever she went. In school, it was no different. The male teachers were often distracted by her presence. Their eyes would linger on her longer than they should. As for the boys in her class, they competed to sit close to her, eager to catch her attention or even share a word with her. All this admiration made Nike proud. She knew she was the most beautiful girl around. The girls in her school were jealous of her. Some would whisper behind her back, but Nike didn't care. She was admired by everyone, and that was all that mattered. Her beauty shielded her from consequences, at least for a while. The male teachers didn't want to reprimand her, and the girls were too envious to care. Nike believed she could get away with anything. She used her beauty to get good grades by starting relationship with three of her male teachers, Mr. Okon, Mr. Taiwo, and Mr. Yemi. The teachers began fighting over her, and rumors spread. The principal, Mr. Deleke, found out and called Nike to his office. She admitted everything. The principal then fired the three teachers involved. Nike was left feeling ashamed and was later expelled from the school. She stayed at home for some weeks before her father found another school for her. Everyone in Nike's new school admired her except for one person, Chike. Chike was different from the others. While every boy tried to win her over, Chike didn't seem to notice her at all. He was always focused on his books. He was always studying and staying out of trouble. He was one of the most intelligent students in their class and the most handsome. His quiet confidence made him stand out, but no matter what Nike did, he remained uninterested. At first, Nike was confused. Then she grew determined. She went out of her way to pass by him in the hallways. She would wear her best outfit and flash her brightest smile. She sat close to him during lunch breaks, with hopes he would look her way, but nothing. Chike was like a wall. He seemed completely oblivious to her beauty, and that stung Nike's pride. When she got home that evening, her anger quickly turned into shock when she entered the living room. Her father was sitting on the couch, laughing and talking with a woman Nike had never seen before. She wasn't Amina, who her father had chased away. This woman was different, young, flashy, and completely at ease in their home. Nike froze. Her eyes were wide. The girl was her age mate. How can her father do this to them? Her father noticed her standing there and smiled, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Nike, meet Lola. She's an old friend of mine, Ele said, his tone casual, as though he hadn't just brought a stranger into their home. Nike couldn't believe what she was seeing. First, Amina had replaced her mother. Now, this new woman was sitting in the same spot, laughing with her father as if she belonged there. She was filled with anger and confusion. Without a word, Nike turned and stormed up the stairs to her room. She slammed the door behind her. Nothing made sense anymore. Everything was out of control, and she didn't know how to stop it. As she lay in her bed, she thought about the days when her family was whole, when her father had loved her mother, and there were no strange women in their house. But now everything is different. She felt like she didn't even recognize her father anymore. He had sent her mother to the village. She wondered how her mother was coping, and she wished that she had enough money to assist her. Tears stung her eyes as she realized how lonely she felt. No one in her life seemed to care about her for who she really was, only for what she looked like. And now, even her home wasn't a safe place. 3 days later, Dele left for a business trip, leaving Nike alone with Lola, his new girlfriend. At first, things were quiet. Nike ignored Lola, but on the third day, everything changed. As Nike was on her way home from school, she caught the attention of Madame Adebisi, a wealthy and powerful woman. Madame Adebisi was well known in the city for her connections and influence. She has helped many women find relationships. Her reputation was both admired and feared. When Madame Adebisi saw Nike, she was struck by her beauty. Something about the girl intrigued her. She noticed the fierceness in Nike's eyes and the anger she carried within. "You dear," Madame Adebisi called out, her voice commanding attention. Nike turned to see the woman staring at her from inside her sleek black car. "Me?" Nike asked, unsure why this rich, elegant woman was calling her. "Yes, you. Come here." Reluctantly, Nike walked over. She had heard about Madame Adebisi and her influence, but she wasn't sure what the woman wanted from her. "What's your name?" Madame Adebisi asked, her eyes scanning Nike from head to toe. "Nike," she replied, standing tall. She wasn't one to be intimidated easily. Madame Adebisi smiled, though it was more calculating than warm. "You have something special about you, Nike, your beauty. But there's also fire in you, I can tell." Nike frowned. "What do you want from me?" she said. "I want to help you," Madame Adebisi said, her voice smooth. "I know people, powerful people." She smiled and gave her complimentary card. When Nike entered the house, she headed straight to her room. She wanted to be alone. But when she opened the door, she froze in shock. There, standing in front of her mirror, was Lola, wearing her mother's clothes. The dress her father had bought for her mother 3 years ago on her birthday. Now, this woman, not much older than her, was parading around in it, like it belonged to her. A surge of anger rushed through Nike's body, and before she could stop herself, she stormed into the room. "What are you doing in my room?" she shouted, her voice filled with anger. Lola turned around, laughing awkwardly. "Oh, I was just trying it on. Relax. It's just a dress." But Nike wasn't listening. She was blinded by the memories of her mother, Bisi, how her father had thrown her out, sent her back to the village, and brought two strange women into their home. First, Amina, who had pretended to care, and now Lola, who was barely older than Nike herself. She couldn't understand it. How can her father, the man who was adored her mother, now be dating someone who was practically her age? It made her sick to think about it. The anger bubbled inside her until it became too much to control. Lola sensed Nike's growing rage and tried to walk past her. Calm down, you are overreacting, she said as she headed towards the door. But Nike couldn't hold it in any longer. As Lola passed, something snapped inside her. Without thinking, she reached out and shoved Lola hard. It all happened so fast. Lola lost her balance and she stumbled backward. Nike's eyes widened in horror as she watched Lola fall down the steps. Her body crashed against the steps as she lay unconscious. Nike's heart raced. Her hands were shaking as she realized what she had done. She hadn't meant to push her that hard. She hadn't meant for this to happen. Nike stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her mind spinning. What had she done? She didn't hate Lola, not really. She was angry, yes, but not like this. She looked at Lola, who was not moving, and fear gripped her as she ran out of the house. But what Nike did not know was that this was just the start of a surprise she didn't expect, one that would completely change her life, where she would find herself to be pregnant and alone.